Okay, I think we're on time. Let me call to order the June 21st, 2022 hearing of the Hood River Planning Commission. My name is Mark Frost, and I will be presiding as chair of the Planning Commission. Let me start with the Planning Director's update. Do you have any updates in terms of next meetings we should know about?
Nothing on the schedule right now. We'll probably expect something not until August based on the timing of how our reviews are playing out at this point. So unless we have some surprise agenda item, probably nothing coming through in July.
Okay. Appreciate the update. Thanks. All right. So let me move into then the public hearing. So let me begin with a description of the process and a few disclosures. So first, the function of the Planning Commission is to review the record for tonight's hearing, take testimony, and determine whether the application meets or does not meet the applicable approval criteria. It is not our job to be more restrictive or lenient than these approval standards allow, but rather to interpret and apply the approval standards as written. If you have any question about the applicable approval criteria, they are listed and analyzed in the staff report. Second, we are required to render an impartial decision. This means we cannot have a personal financial stake or bias that would prevent us from making an impartial decision. Before we begin, we will call for the disclosure of bias, ex parte contact, and conflicts of interest from each commissioner. Anyone in the audience will then have the opportunity to question any of us about those disclosures. Once we issue our written decision, it is final unless appealed to City Council. To appeal our decision, you must participate either orally or in writing before the record closes. You must raise any issue and present evidence you might wish to preserve for an appeal to City Council or the Land Use Board of Appeals. Once we close the record, that will end your ability to raise new issues or present evidence. So now we will consider file number 2021-43, Henderson Creek PUD, application by Elizabeth Betts from Klein and Associates. Let me describe the order of events for tonight's hearing. First, we will hear the staff report. Then we will hear from the applicant. Then we will take testimony from anyone wanting to testify on the hearing. Once we hear testimony, the applicant will have the final right of final rebuttal and the opportunity to answer questions. Finally, after everyone has had a chance to testify, we will close the record, deliberate, and may render a decision tonight. Our decision, however, is not final until it is reduced to writing and officially issued. Here are some rules for presenting testimony in tonight's hearing. Only present testimony when called upon, and let the commission chair know you want to testify by raising your hand in the Zoom tool or *9 on your phone. Please begin with your name and mailing address. Limit your testimony to the applicable approval criteria identified in the staff report. Our decisions are governed quite strictly by those approval criteria, and they are the only issues we can take into consideration. If you believe that different criteria apply, please identify those and explain why you think they apply. Failure to raise an issue accompanied by evidence with sufficient specificity to allow us or the parties to respond to the issue will preclude an appeal to the City Council or LUBA based on that issue. And failure by the applicant to raise constitutional or other issues related to the proposed conditions of approval with sufficient specificity to allow us to respond to the issue will preclude an action for damages in circuit court. So that is the procedural introduction for tonight's hearing. If there's any questions, please raise your hand. We will address them. And if anyone has any questions about the hearing process moving forward, feel free to ask them during the public testimony portion of the meeting. Okay, so we will consider file number 2021-43, an application by Elizabeth Klein. I think that's Elizabeth Betts by Klein and Associates for a 9-lot subdivision and a planned unit development. A quorum of the Planning Commission is present, and I will ask all commissioners to disclose any ex parte contacts, conflicts of interest, or bias in this matter. All right, if I could go down the list and get everybody to come off mute and give me a verbal. Looking at the top, now you've all moved. Vice Chair Commissioner Powers.
I have none.
Commissioner Bill Irving.
I have none.
Commissioner Ben Mitchell.
I have none.
Commissioner Kate Hoffman.
I have none.
Commissioner Mary Ruth Petzing.
I also have none.
Can I get everyone? This is Mark. I have none myself. Okay, I think that's it. Does anyone in the audience or on the commission question any commissioner on any disclosure, ex parte contact, bias, or conflict of interest, or otherwise challenge the participation of any member of the commission? Seeing none, I will continue. All right. May we have the staff report, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members, one matter on tonight is a request from Elizabeth Betts from Klein and Associates. The request is for a 9-lot subdivision comprised and based around a conditional use request for a planned unit development. The subdivision is located in an existing R1 zone incorporated into the city. The site is approximately 2.61 acres. You have a staff report. It's approximately 100 pages with another 150 pages of exhibits that has been provided and posted on the city's website. The request revolves around a couple key criteria. 1703 is the R1 zone. Again, this is currently zoned R1, single family residential. It is not, there's no request to rezone the property. A couple of key provisions regarding conditional uses. All planned unit developments within the city are reviewed as conditional use approvals. Essentially, the conditional use and planned unit development allow a flexible set of standards that departs from a typical subdivision. Although they are subdivisions creating more than 3 parcels of land, planned unit development allows for some flexibility in street design and lot design, so long as the site still continues to perform at about the same density or a density contemplated by R1, and a certain amount of the site is set aside in common open space, in which this case it is. You have that exhibit. Much of the site is impacted by wetlands. Vast majority of those wetlands are set aside in common tracts, free of development. The site includes an extension of Henderson Creek Trail as a portion of the development through a common open space easement dedicated to the public, and completion of that trail to be aligned with the Rock Creek subdivision, which you heard in January, which is to the north. You have at this time comments from agencies. At the time of this hearing and at the time of the production of this report, we had not received comments from the neighbors. So anything that we received in writing from neighbors prior to the production of the report was submitted. Nothing at the time of the report was provided to the applicant or to you. We did get a last comment that just came through. I sent that over to the applicant. I have not had time to review it. Typically, that's something that we want presented in public or provided to the applicant ahead of time so they can respond to that that has come in. Really, essentially, the 9 lots are based around the planned unit development standards, as well as some architectural bonuses that really account for the single lot being added. The applicant has provided some architectural standards, and there's some orientation features that really allow the city to grant that single lot bonus that is requested. That request is included in here, as well as the findings that back the bonus. You do have the conditions of approval, comments regarding the installation of public utilities, easements, protections, subsequent development measures that would need to be fulfilled at the time of civil engineering, compliance requirements to collaborate with the neighbor to the north in the installation and construction of Blackberry, the public street that provides access to this development. And with that, that's really the basis. We have the applicant here, or applicant and design project manager Elizabeth Betts, who could probably also fill in the gaps. So I won't go into this too much. She has plenty of information she can share regarding her request. You have a recommendation for approval as conditioned with findings located in your packet. I'd be happy to dive into any questions that you all may have regarding the request as you process it.
All right, any questions for Dustin? I guess I have one question, which is, on achieving a density bonus, they get that from looking at some architectural features. How do we track that? How do we make sure that they comply to that, and that that the development is self-policing to make sure that, because it's going to happen over time, right? So we probably don't have all the plans up front of all those units. So how do we put it back on the PUD to track the compliance around that?
Thank you. Yeah, it comes down to building permits. Those architectural features are really materialized at the time of construction without really a master plan development and them outlined. We count them. There's 6 specific architectural features that are required. We basically inventory 6 features on that lot, on these houses when they come in for a permit or they don't get issued. So the background is there. The plan unit development is really the master plan that really layers that next set of rules onto this development, onto this property. Those are binding with the land. So as these lots are sold, the rules, conditions of the PUD follow that land, and that includes those architectural design standards. So without those being fulfilled, there's no permits that get issued.
Okay. I guess my next question relates to some public input that we got today. I know not everyone has had a time to review that, but to the extent we can get ahead of a question, I think is kind of obvious for a lot of us, because it came up in January when we looked at the other application. It has to do with the where Rocky Road hits May Street, and the report talks about the limited impact on that that junction, but again, remind us, I think it's the same situation that we found ourselves in January, that that's outside of the scope of this meeting, or do you think it becomes part of something we want to deliberate against?
Yeah, so both in relationship, and I think our panelist is raising one hand. Oh, no,
Yeah, Mary,
Commissioner.
yeah.
Okay. Sorry, I'll take your question if you're feeling it to me now. The applicant is responsible for producing a traffic impact analysis and how the development as proposed creates a situation, or how what we're looking at is the adequacy of the public facilities in kind of a sphere of influence.
Yep.
And the finding becomes, are the facilities that are within that sphere of influence as scoped by the city's traffic engineer or the city's engineer, can we make a finding that the improvements are adequate for the purposes of this development? So in your traffic analysis and what's included here, that May and Rocky Road intersection is included. You have findings that have been reviewed, submitted by their traffic engineer and approved by us, or by our staff and traffic engineer, that the level of service, which is really the kind of the baseline analysis for traffic and auto engineering, remains before and after a level of service for this development. So when we looked at both the Rock Creek subdivision and this subdivision, you had a traffic analysis that considered both. So when we scope traffic analysis, we don't always look just solely at this development. We'll ask for other developments that are in play that are reasonably likely to add trips to that analysis to be considered as well. So we get a little bigger picture from what is being contemplated. In this instance, you have a finding that it operates at a level of service A, and after the fact, it will still operate at a level of service A. Therefore, we have a finding and recommendation that the adequacy of that public facility for the sake of vehicle trips is adequate. And that's an offsite facility too, which adds, we can talk about that, but that's a whole nother issue, is that nothing on site is limited. Hope that answers your question.
Yeah, thanks very much. All right, Commissioner Pretzing.
So thank you. Could you just make sure I understand how this works? So my understanding is that based on kind of the general characteristics of a road, there's a predetermined calculation of what it can support in terms of trips per hour. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, that's a part of it.
Okay. And that is assumed to take into account that there is some pedestrian and / bicycle usage of a typical road is taken into account in that calculation of trips per hour.
This is a scope for vehicle trips on this road. So the traffic analysis is scoped in this is for is auto vehicle trip.
Right, but I'm asking, is there an assumption when you're deciding that a road that's 20 feet wide, that has no sidewalks, that blah, 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 can take this many trips per hour? Is there an assumption in there that there will be some pedestrians? Or the assumption is there's zero pedestrian usage?
We assume some pedestrian usage.
Okay. So I guess then my question is, there's no differentiation, again, I'm checking my understanding, between roads that are, as in this case, designated as a trail, or roads that are designated as bikeways, and other roads in terms of what those assumptions are in the non-vehicle trip usage. Did that question make any sense?
I didn't follow that one.
Okay, so like any road that's 20 feet wide and has no sidewalks has kind of the same underlying assumptions, and there's not a distinction between, you know, say like on the Heights, I forget what it is, B Street is a bikeway. It's not treated any different to like A or C Street.
Oh, we'll treat, no, we have various classifications of streets. So regardless of the physical layout, we will also evaluate its future usage based on its designation as, is this a local street assumed to carry this much traffic? Is this a collector street designated as a collector assumed to carry this much traffic? Is this an arterial street designated and modeled to take this much traffic? Those designations don't always align with the current physical characteristics of the road. So if we had a site, basically it said, we're going to move in 2023 or 2032, this site is going to take on this many vehicle trips, and we're going to add this trips to it, and it's going to result in a failure, or it's not functioning, or it's not built to that. There may be findings and needed improvements that are triggered because of its non-compliant status.
Okay, but
Is that, I don't know if that's,
yeah, that's not, my question is there a classification of streets that are heavily used as bike or pedestrian streets because they are trails or bikeways?
that yes, there is.
Okay,
They're not necessarily streets that are designated. It's more of designated bikeways and bike paths. So I would call it like an overlay on top of that.
okay, thank you. So is Rocky Road designated as that?
It has a not a designated bikeway, but it's got a pedestrian facility that is considered in the future plan on it. So it is highlighted as a facility that will have pedestrian and bike traffic on it. It's identified as that.
Okay, and is that taken into account in this analysis that they submitted?
No, that's not taken into account.
Okay, so that is the issue that I think that we keep coming back to, is why not? And I don't mean that, again, I get that outside of the scope, in the sense that why not seems to be because the rules don't require it, and so the rules don't require it. But I think that's where we keep running into this issue. Or, I mean, you can tell me that
Sorry.
I'm wrong.
Oh, no, I was waiting for the question. So
Well, okay, that's my question. Is
Yep.
is that why this keeps coming up?
I think the rules that do not require it to be considered for this application, and the scope, and then we would call it the nexus of that relationship from this development isn't triggering its review or the improvements. So if we had a development that was so impactful that it had a proportionate impact to it, we would most likely be talking about the installation of those improvements as a requirement to meet the public facility. If that helps speak to it. So the amount, a 9-lot subdivision that is located, 400 feet away from a trail, it's not triggering the requirements to do upgrades or condition approval against the rules as they're in place now. Nor is the city's engineering or transportation team requiring the applicant to address that, to demonstrate that there's a sufficient amount of public facilities in place here.
All right. That's, are you, Commissioner Petzing, are we good for now?
I mean, sure, I guess I still am not quite clear, but I want to let other people ask.
Okay, thanks. Commissioner Irving, saw your name up, hand
Sure.
up next.
I guess I'll try and ask a pointed question to Mary Ruth's question. So to be clear, Dustin, and I think I know the answer, but the fact that the intersection at May and Rocky is a trail has no impact on any of the analysis. Is that correct?
No impact is, I wouldn't say there's no impact.
Well,
The
I don't, let me phrase it more differently. As far as the traffic impact analysis, the fact that there is a trail crossing there has no impact on the traffic impact analysis.
Not in terms of the level of service, no.
Okay.
In terms of site visibility, it does have, there's other components to it that we will look at. There's
Okay.
the traffic analysis is not the only component that evaluates pedestrian connectivity in facilities. So we will look at other parts of the code where we do identify and talk about pedestrian access. That's really more in the subdivision code, less in the traffic analysis section.
Okay. Thanks. I have another kind of question, and it kind of goes a little bit to the offsite nexus stuff, but it seems that we have through the course of the partition that created Sorensen's lots way back when, there is this existing right of way, and that Blackberry happens to be in, and we're starting to serve a lot of, I won't say a lot, we're starting to, with the subdivision to the north, with this subdivision, and then with potentially the subdivision that we heard on the other side off a car, and then once we get Willow Ponds, I'm wondering at what point do we get the portion of Blackberry that is between this subdivision and Rocky Road built to some standard?
You have a condition of approval that requires prior to final plat, this Blackberry be completed.
With this subdivision to the 20-foot standard that is a PUD road that's got a curve in it.
Yes,
Okay.
both. So it's final plat for the entire subdivision. That Blackberry infrastructure must be in place.
Okay. Is it going to be, okay. And that Blackberry infrastructure is that getting built by Rocky Road or this?
There's
I mean, the Rocky Road subdivision.
there's a recommendation that they work together. However, they both subdivisions are dependent on that road being completed.
Okay.
Part of the issue becomes a non-degradation regulation. Basically, you can't build a street and immediately come in and start hacking it up. So the developers are going to have to collaborate on its coordinated install for them to have both sets of infrastructure in place to serve both developments. And I think they both were aware of that on the front end. Again, knowing that we had two subdivisions really running not quite parallel, but almost parallel on either side of this road.
Okay. Well, I guess I was looking at the subdivision to the north, and it shows Rocky, and this goes, the Rock Creek subdivision. The design of Rocky Road for the portion that is east of this parcel looks different than the proposed Rocky Road on this property, on this application. That's it. I'm seeing two different things.
Yep, they will have to reconcile that in final design, in civil design.
Okay. So there's a condition in there that it's not going to end up with a 20-foot wide PUD road. That's just, I'm asking a question.
No, the PUD ends outside of Blackberry. So the PUD road to the south, those are the only PUD streets. Blackberry is a common publicly held right of way that will be designed for public.
Sorry. Phone time.
That is a known connector street in public right of way.
Right. Okay. So it's going to, jeez, my kid is calling me. Sorry about that. So it's a condition of approval prior to final plat, regardless of who gets there first. One or the other is going to have to build the portion of Blackberry that connects to Rocky.
Correct.
To some local street standard or something.
Probably a modified street standard, but
Okay.
yes, a public works approved standard.
Okay, got it. That's my question. Thank you. That's it.
Thanks, Commissioner Irving. Vice Chair Sue Powers.
Yeah, I want to go back to the traffic study and the visibility at Rocky Road and May Street. And one of the, I don't recall if it was actually a condition of approval, but there were some comments about how vegetation had to be maintained. And we run into this many times where it just says it must be maintained. And we don't say who or how it will be maintained. But I know that intersection is very problematic already. So I guess I'm just wondering, can we tighten up that requirement to specify how? And is that a city obligation, or who does that?
Oh, sorry, I'm off mute already. It will be a developer obligation when installing that intersection. Part of the requirements for Rock Creek, which extends all the way down to the frontage of Rocky Road, is in that approval, it's much more explicit. It includes the preservation of identified oak trees, and if possible, the Ponderosa pines to the north. So we tried to mandate the saving some trees, but within reason, that when they got into final design, and we call it civil design vertical, we would do an analysis on whether those species could be saved, and be pushing basically a requirement and condition of approval on the northern subdivision that they have to be saved.
So that's down on Rocky Road and May Street?
No, that would be Rocky and Blackberry intersection.
But I think there was something in the report about the lack of visibility challenges at May Street and Rocky Road, and that it required vegetation maintenance. And I'm wondering how that happens, because that's not part of either subdivision.
Yeah, I'm
Is that
looking.
a city obligation?
Yeah, I'm looking for, is that a condition of approval?
Well, that's what I couldn't imagine.
I remember reading it myself.
Yeah, I'm trying to find it. It was
I
also
just don't know
something.
where I saw it. I should have written it down.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it was in the,
I think it's in the report itself and not the attachments. I just don't know if it's actually a condition of approval specifically.
Yeah, I didn't see it in the condition. In terms of the analysis, if it's in the right of way, it can be
it's
city's
page 13.
city's responsibility, offsite, most likely the,
Yeah, thanks for that. Yeah, page 13. A. May Street, Rocky Road intersection should be able to continue to meet the site light requirements so long as any existing vegetation within the site distance triangle continues to be properly maintained and no obstructions are placed within the site distance channel that could impede a driver's vision.
So existing maintenance of vegetation in the right of way could be the city's responsibility. On private property, we couldn't mandate a developer to go on private property and maintain someone else's property. That's
Right.
most likely why it doesn't appear as a condition of approval. I think some of it speaks to future qualifications, so long as nothing else goes in there. It kind of speaks to a future, not as a current satisfactory status, but you can't obstruct it.
Okay.
All right, appreciate that. Any other questions for our planning director? Okay, with that then.
Sorry.
Yeah, go
Just
ahead.
wanted something, sorry, I should have raised my hand. Just wanted something clarified. The 4 guest spots that are on the, that would be installed in the roadway, those would not be counted in terms of extra space required for ADU parking, right? For ADU parking, that would have to be on an additional space on each lot, correct?
No, ADUs will not require any additional parking. So per city code, an ADU will not trigger an additional off-street parking space per 1723 revisions. It was in the past, currently not. The spaces oftentimes are considered for parking requirements when we don't have on-street parking available. This kind of, it's a private street. So in lieu of your on-street parking, it becomes an opportunity for guest parking.
Okay.
I'm
I think,
assuming,
I mean, in reading the staff report, I think they talk about having 2 spots per dwelling, plus
Yes.
an additional spot for ADU, plus the extra 4 spots for planning. But that would be a good question for our applicant to describe as they go through the narrative. And as Dustin said, there would not be a requirement based on the latest city code to have additional allowance for ADU parking on their sites.
Okay, so that mention of an extra spot for an ADU, that was the developer's decision, or I may have just misread it. I thought
Yeah,
it
no,
said
I that's the way I read it. And again, that would be a good question
Okay.
for Ms. Betts. But I think they're planning for essentially ADU parking to be accommodated on the site. But let's hand it over if that's
Okay, sure.
no other questions. All right, so let's move on then with the applicant's testimony. So if we could promote Ms. Betts, that would be appreciated. All right, you have the floor. We can't hear you yet.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can now.
All right. I'm a bit under the weather, so I'm going to make this really brief. And try to just answer your questions. So the extra lot that we were just kind of a background on that we were asking for with those design architectural details. That's the route we took, the 6 extra details, because originally when we applied for this, or when we went through a pre-app for this project, it was actually 2 separate owners on those lots. And when it was, we've been through like three pre-apps on this project over the years. It was a 2019 project. So when we went through the original pre-app with 2 separate owners on those lots, we actually came out to the 9 lots because of how lots over 2 acre or projects over 2 acres calculate open space different or lots differently. So when we did it as 2 separate lots, it was 9 units, and then we did it as a single owner, essentially the lots combined, it came up with 8. So to get back to our 9, we decided to go the 6 architectural features, which are are really easy to hit because they're things like front porches and gables and siding changes and things that you would want to do anyway in a development like this. Let's see. Blackberry Road, you are totally correct. Our road looks different from the Rock Creek Road. And that is also because of our earlier pre-apps. It changed several times through different pre-apps, different city engineers. And when we applied, the Rock Creek one hadn't been fully defined yet as far as what came out of their conditions from the hearing. We get it, it's different. We plan to match Rock Creek's. The only thing we can't match if we're ahead is that extra 10 feet of right-of-way dedication that they have to give on their property, which gets that path in there. So I think we're all on the same page. I've been talking to their engineers. We talk fairly frequently, and we are coordinating on that. Let's see, the TIA, my understanding on the TIA was that the city engineer did not require the Rocky Road May Street intersection to be analyzed at all with this development. That was something that our traffic engineer asked us if we wanted to do. We said yes, because we knew it was, a subject that was of interest to the neighbors. So that was an extra cost that we added to that TIA, was to analyze that Rocky Road May Street intersection with this project. And the vegetation comment about site distance is something that they add to every report. It's a liability thing, if somebody were to put some big bushes in the site distance that they currently have, then, or in the site triangle, then they can't they can't guarantee that there is site distance if somebody vegetates. My next thing is extra ADU space. I think that also came from the earlier, the fact that this was, a 3-year-old project and the code was different at that time that it was required. We plan to have at least 2 spaces on each site. I mean, these are not huge lots, but for each home, we do plan to have 2. One maybe in a garage, one in a driveway, or something like that. But there are planned for 2 spaces at each home. The 4 extra spaces are really for guest parking, maybe usage of the path. Willow Ponds has them, they get used. It's just nice to have. So that's kind of the plan on those spaces. And then the final thing, not something you guys brought up, but it's something that I brought up during the preliminary comments that Jennifer had said sent out, the path that goes along Henderson Creek. So in the staff report, it says it needs to be a 10-foot wide paved path. And once you pave it, you're going to need probably at least a foot of gravel shoulder. So really that's about a 12-foot wide path. And it's in the creek buffer, a lot of it, so you're kind of ruining the creek buffer and the feel of it. And it's just throughout that open space along the wetland. My understanding when we put in the 6-foot soft surface path is from, let me pull this up so I can, and this was in several pre-app comments, and this is also in the engineering department's comments that are dated 6/14/22. If you go down to, in the engineering comments, number 15, private streets, letter A, it says pedestrian access shall be provided via a sidewalk or through a pathway, which shall be located within a public access easement. So that's the pedestrian access for that private road. And so my understanding of the code is that pedestrian access can either be a 5-foot sidewalk or a 6-foot path. I did propose it to be soft surface like the rest of Rocky Road Trail, because I think that's most appropriate in the along there next to the wetlands. So that's really the only thing that we would like to change about this. The comments that staff report comments that came out, that just to go from the 10-foot paved requirement to a 6-foot soft surface is, we think, more appropriate for that location. And then it also, I think, is what the intent of the comment about pedestrian access for that road, because a 10-foot path is really a multi-use path. And the comment was not about multi-use path, it was about pedestrian access. So I see a question. I don't know if I can answer it. Can I call on you?
Sure. Maybe Dustin should jump in here. I saw some comment or some requirement that the Henderson Creek Trail be outside of a delineated wetland area. And you mentioned something about stream buffer. Are those two the same thing or different? And do you see a problem putting the path outside of a delineated wetland? And has the wetland been delineated, I guess is my question.
Yes, the wetland has been delineated.
And so is the path planned to be outside of it?
The path it was planned to be outside of it, but it does look like it's showing inside of it right now. You know, the wetland does vary in and out. So a lot of that 25-foot buffer does not necessarily have wetland in it. So we may, with the path in the buffer, we may be outside of the wetland. And yeah, I agree, the path shouldn't go in wetland. So I may need to modify that alignment a bit. But the wetland and the buffer are two different things. So the wetland is the actual wetland that's been delineated, and then the buffer is just 25-foot offset from the creek. I think, Dustin, right?
Well, the delineated wetland, which has been delineated on this, is different from the setback and the buffer, which is a general setback. They are two different features. And there's a condition of approval that is included when we have conflicts or where the meandering path may get near the delineated wetland and how that should be treated. So in terms of impervious surface and treatment and or with reduction at those locations. So the intent is to keep that path out of the wetland. It is allowed to be within the buffer. It is a matter of not requiring the other option would be to have a buffer and then have the path outside of it, which continues to eat up more usable real estate, but has been found acceptable to install a path within the Henderson buffer without continuing to eat or consume additional real estate, buildable real estate in this instance. If you look on pages 66 through 69 of your, through 66 through 70, it discusses both pedestrian access, the standards in which we're looking at the trail, some of the spaces, some of the comments that Commissioner Petzing were discussing appear in this section of the code. And it's both pedestrian access and circulation multi-use paths are covered in this aspect of the review.
Okay, I think that kind of gets at, I have to think if that answered my question. So the short of it is that, and I was just trying to, as we were talking, I was trying to find the specific condition related to the path. Is that, and I wanted, it's just basically, I didn't think it mentioned, when I was reading it, I didn't think it mentioned the buffer. I thought it was said that it had to be outside of the delineated wetland. I'm trying to figure out, reread the condition again. Somewhere in the 80s.
Page 88, number 10. Developer shall construct a 10-foot wide multi-use path, the Henderson Creek Trail, traversing the PUD north-south.
Okay. So where's the requirement? Do we want to, I mean, is this the spot where you need the requirement that it's either out of the wetland or outside the buffer or one or both? I'll ask a question for staff.
That's definitely shown and contemplated within the buffer. And definitely intended to be limited encroachment into the delineated wetland. But for the condition in the statement that says permeable paving shall be used where the trail encroaches into that wetland. That should be a pretty limited instance. So that as shown, the trail is out with
Got
a
it.
possibly minor encroachment.
Okay, so really we're focused not necessarily on the buffer, but we're focused on the wetland and it's being in or out of it.
That is, yeah, that's a critical feature.
Okay. That gets to my question on that one. I had one other question, which this is a process question. It looks like so there was a turnaround that was dedicated. Do we need to be doing a vacation as a portion of this?
In Blackberry.
Yeah, I mean, basically there's that 57-foot, whatever it was, turnaround that was on the plat from 2001 or something. And I just wonder process wise, if we're going to get to, Brad Cross and he's going to say, well, you got to vacate that.
Yeah, I don't believe a vacation is requested from council or been identified as engineering requirement.
Okay. All right. I don't.
Considering the right of way is over 50 feet, there's really not going to be a whole lot. I mean, although it may be a large 50-foot bulb in a very narrow driveway, you're going to end up with a pretty significant connector, like 50
Well,
feet of right of way already eating it. So it doesn't really go anywhere. It just gets converted to a throughput, a neighborhood connector street.
Well, when I was looking at the applicant, sorry, I got to get back there. When I was looking at the design, the existing temporary right-of-way turnaround goes into lot 5, I believe is the number. Is that correct?
Yeah. As a temporary, you'll see this shown on LS01 in the packet, and I'm sorry, I ran out of page numbers on there. It's in attachment A. The applicant's attachment is a good place to see it. Engineering has identified a need to vacate that property. They have not identified a need to vacate a temporary turnaround in order for this to happen.
Okay. All right. I wonder if process wise we should, and I don't know where we do this check, but it seems like, I mean, in the event a vacation was necessary, this would have to go through some public process, correct?
That's correct.
It would come to us and it would have to go to council.
That's correct. In the event that it becomes necessary, it would have to be a public hearing.
Okay. It seems like it might be worthwhile to triple check with the county surveyor that he's agreeable that we don't need to do that. It's going into, it's cutting into lot 5 right now. Now, that's just a note to staff, I guess.
Question, does it change if that's there because of a turnaround? Does it change with the additional connectivity of the Rock Creek Road? Or if you, instead of needing a turnaround on Blackberry, you would be able to turn right and exit through Rock Creek Road. So is there something happening because of these two coming together at about the same time?
I guess where I was going with it, it looks like, the shared driveways, it looks like they're, it's got to be compliant with all the fire turnarounds and all that stuff. I think we've addressed it. My concern is for the applicant that we're going to get down the road here and someone's going to say, oh, well, it says that there was a right of way. If you look at a plat that was from 2001, it says that there's a right of way, semicircular right of way that's on lot 5. And it's a temporary right. It's a temporary right of way. So I'm asking how we get rid of the temporariness of the right of way.
Right.
That's my question.
Maybe that's a question for the applicant.
Yeah, thanks. I see under number 13, under the engineering department comments dated 6/14/22. It says the existing Blackberry Drive right-of-way is 50 feet wide and ends with a 57-foot radius cul-de-sac right-of-way on tax lot 2502. That's that circle. And then we will be required to dedicate the 50 feet of right-of-way to extend Blackberry through lot 2503. And then it says the cul-de-sac radius right-of-way can be removed with the extension of Blackberry Drive right-of-way to the west onto tax lot 2503. So our understanding was that it could go away based on the city engineering comments.
That's what my understanding is potentially too. I'm just wondering if that's what the county surveyor thinks is, if there's some process that we need to go through to get rid of it. You understand my question or my comment?
I do.
Yes, it seems like
That would be a question for our surveyor.
Yes, it
I do
would.
know in Wasco County, I'm doing a similar thing, and we did have to go through a, at the same time, kind of we're going in parallel doing a vacation on something.
That's my question. I don't want you to have to get to the end of all this and be like, oh, by the way, the surveyor said you have to do a vacation and you didn't do it.
Right. Yeah, I do appreciate your catching that.
Yep. Okay. That's it. Thanks.
So I think that's addressed in the document. Just check here. But I think the, okay, so maybe that's something we need to make sure we add into the conditions of approval. I'm not seeing them listed there. Okay. All right, let's move on. Any other thing, Commissioner Irving?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Good. Okay. All right. Vice Chair Commissioner Powers.
Two questions. One is, can you explain to me, Elizabeth, the difference, what built up versus cut in home building means? That's one question I had, was wondering about. And then the other is the connectivity into Willow Ponds on Blackberry Road. There apparently are some issues or something for why that may or may not continue on. I'm just wondering what that's about.
Sure. And to real quick jump back to that radius cul-de-sac thing on the right of way, if you look at condition number 28, it does have just saying that it can be removed. So whether that means we needed to go through a whole vacation hearing or what with that, but it is documented within the conditions of approval that.
Yeah, thanks for finding that. Yep.
Yeah, I was more process checking. I know the comment was in there, but my question was, don't check with the surveyor to make sure you don't have to do a vacation.
Yeah,
So,
that's a great point. My comment about built up rather than cut in. Typically when they build houses, developers like to come in and they cut out their crawl space, and then put their house kind of like down a little, basically to kind of balance their cut and fill. This site, because of its high groundwater, I want to keep the crawl spaces above existing ground. And so that's the point I'm making, is that, the house, you'll fill up to the house. So it'll still sit within it'll still sit nice. It's just you build the house starting from existing ground up rather than cutting your crawl space down, if that makes sense. Because it's just, when you start cutting a crawl space in sites with high groundwater, you get water, and there's no reason for that. So
is there a cost difference in that?
So when they look at it and say, "Ooh, it's definitely more soil," because you've got to fill around it. You're not reusing what you cut out of the crawl space. But honestly, it's probably in the long run less cost because you're not dealing with water. You don't have to pump it. You don't have to pipe it. So yeah, it may be a little bit more if you look at it from the dirt moving cost, but it's just a much smarter way to do it as far as these kind of sites. So that's kind of what our grading is, you know, and when I set finished floor elevations, that's what I will be setting them for, is to keep them above ground. Can you remind me your other comment? I'm
Yeah, I was
not
wondering
batting
what the
100% right now.
concerns are with connecting Blackberry Road into Willow Ponds. Will there be access there? Or sounds like that's a future discussion, but I want to know what was going on
I
there.
believe it's a future discussion. Willow Ponds, those roads are privately owned. So I don't believe that either the city or our applicant can force that connection. It would be a mutual decision, I think, between Willow Ponds and this applicant. The one thing that Willow Ponds does have is they do have emergency access through Blackberry. And so they'll have bollards in there that will keep, you know, unless they decide to have mutual access, there will be bollards in there to prevent daily access. It would just be for emergency, because Willow Ponds only has one entrance right now until Carr Road is built out.
Okay, that good, Commissioner Powers? Okay. All right, any other questions for the applicant? So normally we would go through public testimony for proponents, neutral and opposed. Actually, don't see anyone in the waiting room. If I am wrong, speak up now. And now we would go to applicant's rebuttal. Any last words of wisdom, Ms. Betts?
The only thing I still have left is, you know, the desire to have that as a 6-foot soft surface path, since it will be in that stream buffer, you know, along the stream, rather than a 10-foot wide paved path. I think the intent of both the Public Works comments and all of the pre-app comments we've gotten on this project were to have that be a pedestrian access, not intended to be a multi-use. So that's the only one thing that I would like to make sure is in there, and it's something that we brought up, you know, before the comments were finalized as well. I don't think it's appropriate to have a 10-foot wide paved path alongside a wetland, you know, and within a stream buffer.
So I don't know if it's appropriate to have this conversation now or in deliberation. If we want your response to our comments, I would say we should have this conversation now. Some of us have been part of the Planning Commission long enough to talk about the transportation network that we desire for the west side of town. And there is a diagram that talks about the connectivity. I don't know what page that's on, but there's a diagram on page 69, which talks about the connectivity of that path. And I can tell you that since the beginning of time that we've been talking about Henderson Creek Trail, we have imagined it as a multi-use path. Being that it sort of cuts a diagonal across the rise from down near Safeway and up to Post Canyon Road. And so we see it as a very logical way of being able to transport yourself on a bicycle from a low site to kind of up on the Post Canyon area. In that regard, I'm in favor, I can tell you, of a multi-use path. And I know that's slightly different from, let's say, the west side trails that we have today, but I see, you know, this being a vital connector that can take a lot of people away from busy streets in order to get from downtown up to this end of the west side.
Mm-hmm.
So that's my opinion. And I think that some folks who have been on the Planning Commission may have been part of those discussions. I know that there's a lot of new faces that don't remember those discussions. But so I guess I'm surprised that we would talk about a 5-foot permeable surface, just because we've always been, or I would say we've contemplated a lot this idea of this multi-use path. So I don't know if we want to go into deliberation now. Dustin, do you have any words of wisdom to help guidance of where we should go with this discussion?
Can I comment real quick before
ahead.
Dustin does?
Yeah,
If we look at that figure 2, the pedestrian system plan on page 68,
yeah,
P4 is the West Side Community Trail on shown on Rocky Road there.
sure, right.
And that may or may not be completely right, but P19 is the Henderson Creek Trail, and that's defined as a 6-foot wide path. Just right underneath that figure. And so that's really, I mean, between that and then the fact that the city pre-app comments all along have said this is pedestrian access and could be provided with a sidewalk, which a sidewalk would be a 5-foot wide sidewalk. I mean, you guys probably, most of you probably know I walk this a lot.
Oh, right.
You've seen me out there. I walk down the middle of Rocky Road, and I know that as it gets developed, it's going to change.
But I think what I would say is that we would rather P4 go away in favor of P19, right? To get the pedestrians off of that steeper part of the road and the junction up from the north side of May Street and the steepness of the beginning of Rocky Road. So I think in the long term, you know, as Commissioner Petzing's talking about in terms of that junction there, you know, the sightlines are not great. We would prefer in the long run for P19 to become, you know, a nice trail that goes along a creek that becomes a trail of preference. I think that's what we've been thinking about. Emerald City type of discussions that we've been having. Emerald Pearl trails. So I think that's where that's coming from. I mean, I think I would rather, as I look at your plan, sacrifice the closeness to the creek and, you know, the design of the private streets on this subdivision. It seems like it could lend itself to marrying the multi-use path closer to the roads. What would that be called? Next to lots 5, 6, and 6, right? I think we could move that path closer to that road if it means getting out of the wetland. But I would be more in favor of a multi-use path next to that road and not quite be out there in a stream, rather than have it be not a you know, a multi-use path.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I totally see what you're saying. I don't fully understand, I guess, because P4, as it's shown, goes and it jogs down Blackberry, right? So that would be a 10-foot path down Blackberry from Rocky Road. So that is planned to be the connection, is to come onto Rocky Road on the south end, to go down Blackberry. And then I know P19 to the north is, I think, conditioned on Rock Creek to be 10 feet wide. Is that correct? So this little piece is not really shown in here as, and if it's 10 feet wide, then you wouldn't need the piece on Blackberry Road to be 10 feet wide, you know, because you wouldn't be using Rocky Road, I think. I don't know. It just seems like an awful lot of pavement next to wetlands. I guess that's my point.
Dustin, any guidance?
Yeah, you have a couple different requirements coming in here. You have the transportation system plan, which you've been talking about, the 6-foot pathway of Henderson Creek. You also have and you'll find this discussion back in your packet, a block connectivity and pedestrian connectivity. It's not a that's related to section 1612 of the code. Whenever we do subdivision of real estate, we start talking about pedestrian connectivity outside of the transportation system plan and its special project that it's highlighted. The idea is to shorten up the blocks and allow the opportunities for subdivisions to be created at a PED scale. When these block lengths become larger, or there's There's no connection points. There's an opportunity to make that block length work with the section of trail also in the pathway as a multi-use pathway. Those are supposed to be 10 feet wide. That is identified and called out in the staff report. So as we get through the discussion of not only a pedestrian trail in the TSP Henderson Creek, but a block length section, and the only opportunity, the exclusive north to south pedestrian path built within this, other than the private street, is where you end up with a larger single facility that serves all those and satisfies all those code requirements. So with the only piece, there's no sidewalks here. It's the only tie-in of this subdivision north to south, and the pedestrian connection is the only one that shortens up the block length. We kind of have to synthesize, how do we satisfy not only the TSP, the block length standard, and the pedestrian connectivity analysis. It all comes together, and that's why the recommendation is what it is. There's no sidewalk located in this subdivision. It is the exclusive north to south pedestrian access that will be here now and through any future development, tying into the West Side Trail, tying into Rock Creek, which is built at this size. That's some of the analysis that is written in here. So not to dispute anything else you heard, but I just kind of providing some of the rationale behind some of the regs.
Okay. Ms. Betts, your hand is still raised. Do you want to provide your final rebuttal? Any other comments before we close the hearing?
Unfortunately, I need to get my son and myself over to urgent care tonight.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And they close at 7. So.
Okay. Well, I
might
think
have to do an extension, or I can leave my husband in front of the computer as my representative. I don't know what you want to do.
Well, I think we're ready for a staff recap and close the hearing. So Dustin, if that allows us to release Ms. Betts, is there anything else that you want to add before we close the hearing? And
No,
is that okay?
I'm here for your questions, and I think we're ready for you to do deliberation. The only issue would be is if the applicant has procedural motions, which I'm assuming we should be past process. But they brought up a bunch of issues that preserve their standing for an appeal if need be. If something goes completely sideways, she's preserved that. So I think we could substitute with significant other. And I have no more comments.
All right. All right, then. So with that, then I'll close the hearing, and let's open it up for our internal discussion. I see, or Bill, did you have a question before I close the hearing? You're on mute.
I have a staff. Yep, I have a staff question, and this kind of gets back to, and I read it, but I didn't interpret it. Elizabeth's comment kind of put me a little out of what I thought the intention was. What's the requirement for connectivity with Blackberry to the west? Because she was mentioning maybe it will connect and there will be bollards in the way, and it's not planned to be a transportation automobile connection.
Yeah, we were able to do this is from quick recollection. Willow Ponds is a condition of approval based upon attaining an easement or the right of way from Sorensen for that street connection. So I think our expectation is in spite of them being private streets, that we were going to have some cross connection there.
Okay.
Via easement.
Via easement. Okay. For automobile traffic. I mean, it seems like we have a TSP. We expect local streets to line up. We have places where, we try to make them line up and they don't. And we have 3 developments coming here, and it seems like we darn sure need to make sure that one person knows what the other person's doing and the other person's doing, and that we require that connectivity happen. And if person A doesn't like person B, that doesn't mean that connection C doesn't happen. So,
well, Blackberry is going to happen. It's going to be a public right of way, and it will have public access. When Willow Ponds was, I don't have the Willow Ponds document in front of me. That was permitted in the county. So the expectations may be different, but all the developments that we're doing will have public access regardless.
Okay, so our requirement is that, and I got to go look at the drawing one more time, is that Blackberry is not a private road and not a shared driveway, but that is a public right of way going to be built to some standard to the west of the property.
Correct. That's that will be public property, public access, public
Okay.
rights of way.
Okay, it's good. That was my understanding. And then I guess okay, that's it. Thank you.
Okay, then any other questions for Dustin before we close the hearing for reals this time? All right, let's close the hearing. All right, so we have in front of us approval of condition of use permit for this PUD. We have a boatload of conditions of approval starting on page 86. There's a couple of areas that we have been asked to weigh in. One in particular is encroaching on some wetlands in order to reach or gain access to lot 7. So I'll be curious on everyone's opinion on that. Otherwise, any other questions that you want to raise between us, please let me know. Who would like to kick us off? Commissioner Powers.
Art, yeah. I guess regarding the access to lot 7, I'm fine with that. And they called out, that they made it over the most narrow part of the wetland cross with the driveway they could do, yeah. But I want to also go back to the trail. And that's a really tough one because I hate the thought of the wetland being paved over by 10 feet. So the P4 defined the Henderson Creek Trail as 6 feet. So I know we've got to meld all these different requirements together, what this trail actually is. But I guess I would like to propose that we minimize that impact. I still think it should be I guess a paved or concrete trail, but I'd just like to know if we could shrink the size of that. That would be my option on that.
Right.
Rather than 10 feet.
What about Dustin's comment, which is if you're combining north-south connectivity with all these other things, it gets us to 10 feet.
Yeah, I think it's hard to have a multi-use path if it's not that wide. As someone who's been both a avid bicyclist and a pedestrian bicycle commuter, that 6 feet is not wide enough to really accommodate that in a safe way.
That's even more important with electric bikes coming on. Yeah.
Yes, yeah, and I was really, I am very thankful for all the wetland preservation that's being done in this development, but pointing out the fact that there aren't any, with the issues with there not being any sidewalks, and then all of the issues that people have brought up about the Rocky Road, May Street, issues with traffic and bikes and those concerns. I feel like having this as a multi-use path, Mark, I think you had mentioned that earlier that the idea was that would become a diversion from people being on May Street and being on Rocky Road. And I think that makes a lot of sense. And I think that if we didn't do that we would be really sad about it later.
Right. Yeah, there's a couple of places along the Henderson Creek. And again, you guys weren't part of all of this, but as it goes down towards where the new future school would be, there were some roads that would connect. And I can imagine that this trail, and again, if you think about it coming from Safeway and crossing where the new housing development will be on Rand and then coming up the hill, it would be great to get this traffic off the main streets. And that's what we were thinking about, and follow the line of Henderson Creek. And I'm not going to begin to suggest that the entire length of it will be in the woods, right? There's going to be times where the trail will be next to a stream, Henderson Creek, and other times that it will be following an existing road. And I guess what I would say is, where I'm leaning towards is I would rather have the ability to create a multi-use path, even if it's connected with this private road, as a sort of widening of the private road, and have it play that function rather than put the path in the wetland as a permeable surface, as 6 feet. I would rather have the connectivity on the multi-use than to kind of go with this idea that it needs to be a meandering path through woods.
Mhm.
Okay,
I'd agree.
good point.
Is the issue, I guess, more of the the width of the path or the permeability? Because I know there was a mention of soft surface. Like,
I think the
in
way
terms of the
that-
wetland, are we more concerned about having a permeability issue or encroachment? I guess I'm just thinking about a larger permeable path. I guess me being new, I'm not sure why paving necessarily makes it a multi-use path versus a soft permeable surface, or what we even mean about like a soft surface versus a hard surface. Although
I mean, a lot of the existing paths around with the west side right now are essentially bark mulch, which is great for walking your dog, and it could be 6 feet wide, and it could be as close to the stream as you want to make it pretty. But if we're going to, let's say, create this connector, and I appreciate that we don't talk about it as a 10-foot connector in P19. We talk about it about 6 feet wide, but for sure, we've been thinking about this as I'll call it a major thoroughfare. If you're on a bicycle and you're on an e-bike and you're trying to get away from downtown and up without going through traffic. So, this hasn't yet been defined. These are all kind of grand plans about the future of the West Side that we're trying to essentially piecemeal together as we see these different developments come in to play. And so we're trying to preserve some idea that, we could get to that. So to answer your question, I think, what I'm seeing on the plan right now is a lot of the path going through wetlands. And that would be okay if it was narrow and permeable, but I don't think that's getting to where we were hoping it to be. And I think we would prefer it to be a hard surface and wider. So any other, Sue, are you satisfied there, or any other
Yeah,
comments or
no,
questions?
I agree with some of the comments that the connectivity is probably the most important thing, and there might be other ways to get it. But I think the way the conditions are written now is that it will continue to go through the wetland, and then that kind of goes back to the definition of a delineation. I'm not really sure exactly where this is falling.
I thought it said, it said 10 feet, but if it was in wetland, it needs to be permeable, right? That's the way it's written right now.
Okay,
It's
My
condition,
understanding,
Yeah, go
10.
ahead.
condition 10 is where it is,
Yeah.
page 8.
so my understanding is that we're talking about permeable, but it's permeable if it's in the, it has to be permeable. The question is it paved or soft surface? That's my
They somewhat mean
understanding
the
of
same thing, right? So it's hard to make a hard surface that's permeable.
Well,
The-
my understanding is the report indicates that that is a thing.
That is
I
what I
don't know how
also
it
saw.
works.
I also saw and had that written down as I am not quite sure what a hard permeable surface is. Like, are we talking about like packed earth or, like I don't know, pea gravel, or what exactly we're talking about there?
They make permeable paving, right? It's asphalt that lets water flow through it.
Yeah,
I don't know, I won't say asphalt, but they make
Not cheap.
permeable paving.
right.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, just as somebody who would end up doing this, there is permeable paving available out there as a construction product. Asphalt can be made permeable. It has large pores. It allows the infiltration of water to go through. There's various types of pavers that are set that allow water to go through, plants to grow out. There's a number of different approaches. They call it grasscrete, which is a pour in place product that is in a form, again, allows product water to go through. So there's a number of different pavings that allow water to flow in and out. I think the way that we read the condition as intended was, if this thing ends up, portions of it end up going into delineated wetland, that is you must do permeable paver in it,
Right.
in those sections.
Okay.
Could we, I mean, it seems like if our intention is to have this thing be used for bicycle traffic, we should probably modify that condition. I mean, Dustin probably hopefully would catch this, but I mean, it seems like at the time when the type of paving product, permeable product gets approved, that it is, there's some transition to the non-permeable product, or that it's suitable for bike traffic, I would think. I mean, like Grasscrete for me is probably not totally suitable for bike traffic.
I feel like we already have this covered, though.
Dustin?
I think we'll be looking at civil plans. I mean, I think it's just left there to be open. It may not even be the whole trail. It may not be forward sections. It may be, the shoulders. I think it's just left open to be, not going to spec a product until we're at civil plans. So
Right.
I
But
certainly
doesn't-
expect the civil engineers to not put in something that becomes a hazard to traffic.
So, but to hit our objective, I mean, we're making some specific reason why we're going to 10 feet versus 6 foot and making it hard surface versus bark or whatever. It seems like we should stick in that condition that whatever permeable product we end up with, that it's suitable for bike traffic.
Yeah, I mean, that can be added. I think the reason why it's 10 foot and paved is based upon a need to comply with section 1612. I mean, regardless of the philosophical end of it, there's a statutory requirement we are trying to hit, and the condition is there to satisfy that. If you want to add an added comment to reflect the wish for bicycle and multi-use ped, that doesn't hurt.
Yeah, it seems reasonable to hit, if we're going to go through this process and we've got some touch points on it, and we're making a decision for specifically to make a choice to do one thing for one reason, we want to make sure that reason gets upheld, I guess. But I have one question for you, Dustin, so when someone is going to do some activities inside a delineated wetland, like crossing for lot 7 or putting a path through it, is there some requirement to coordinate that with DSL or not?
Yeah, that's permit by Department of State Lands. It's mentioned also in the applicant's request. It talks about DSL permitting. Any impact is going to go through the state agency. They're automatically notified of this land use request as soon as it comes out, because there's mapped wetlands on it, and work that occurs in the future is coordinated and permitted by the Department of State Lands, just as it was with Willow Ponds, just as will be with Rock Creek. They will all have DSL permitting requirements and permitting and oversight. This is no different.
So that's what I understood. And I didn't see any, I mean, I don't want to state the obvious, but if you're an applicant picking this thing up 2 years from now and you weren't party to it, or who knows where the subdivision goes, it could get sold. I mean, is there any reason that we should comment in the findings that there is required coordination with DSL for any activities, any construction activities in the wetland? Do you think? Because I didn't see any DSL mentioned anywhere in the conditions.
You could, but whether you do or not, it doesn't change that it is required. So I guess that's.
No, I'm not.
You're gonna add
I understand that. I'm just trying to make it clear.
Yeah, I mean, That's why we have 54 conditions of approval. I'm sure a 55th that mentions a DSL is not going to change the applicant's perspective.
Right. Okay.
Okay, anything else, Commissioner Irving?
Nope.
Commissioner Pesting?
I wanted to go back to this trail. I have a recollection that on the Rocky Road or Rock Creek subdivision, that we had said that we wanted the condition of approval to say like whatever Parks and Department wants for the trail.
Yeah.
Did I make that up?
I remember, and I guess I have it open in front of me myself, but I remember that we basically said, plan for, anticipate that there will be a trail system going through that area of the site.
Mhm.
I don't remember whether, and I could look it up here, whether we asked for 10 feet or paving it, or to be matching of the requirements set by the Parks and Rec, but I know they were supposed to dedicate the space.
Just to help you
Yep.
get there. There is a caveat that you added about design to be coordinated with Parks and Rec as their surface. We did not recommend that in this staff report. We just went to hard surface to satisfy the connectivity requirement.
Okay, that was my question, is why would we do it differently given the contiguous nature? And
Right.
I think we had this discussion then and felt like Parks and Rec would be the people who would be best suited to determine what the best surface would be for the use. I agree that it makes sense to have an alternative to Rocky Road, and that it would make sense to have this be a 10-foot with the transportation safety or system plan. But I think there's also people who know more than me. So but I mean, if there's a clear difference between this and the Rock Creek, then I guess that makes sense.
No, you're correct. There shouldn't be a difference, right? It should be contiguous, and we should work with the Parks Department to figure out what that trail is all going to be, because it's really it's a long way, and it goes through a number of parcels, and so it's going to take some actually significant effort. And actually, in the past, we've asked the city to actually put it into, let's say, a planning effort, so that it just doesn't become piecemeal, because really there could be some land purchases required in order to achieve it. So it's kind of a longer story for sure. And I agree, it shouldn't necessarily be anything different than what we saw with Rock Creek. Okay, any other comments or questions, concerns about whether we approve this conditional use or not, that anyone wants to raise before we entertain a motion? Yes, go ahead, Commissioner Powers.
I just want to understand what was just said. Are we saying that we're going to change the condition of approval regarding the trail away from the specific requirements we have and change it to match Rock Creek development, which is to say Parks and Rec will determine it? Which I guess would be okay, but I don't know what that's going to result in, so I'm a little bit less comfortable with that, even though we did that last time.
Yeah, I know. I sort of I think I like the way I'm seeing this written right now, right? Which is the 10-foot wide
More specific,
multi-use
yeah.
path. And so I think that, I don't know if we want to get out of jail card, or would we say, unless otherwise determined by the Parks and Recs, and add that, the note about making sure the permeable paving is also functioning as a, I think that's one thing that we want to add, right? Which is that the permeable paving in the places where it needs to also function as the multi-use path. But whether we also add a note that says in conjunction with the plan by Parks and Rec, that could be a way that could be something else that we add. Sorry, I'm just trying to find how we wrote that last one.
I mean, it seemed like there was additional reasons why this should be a 10-foot multi-use that maybe the Rock Creek didn't have. So it makes sense to me that we don't need to write them exactly the same. And I would hope that it would be one contiguous surface across developments. I will say, as a frequent user of the Indian Creek Trail that's right by my house, it is muddy as heck. So having and to the point of becoming fairly unusable frequently. So having those soft paths in a wetland area does, I mean, you trade some usability for the environmental savings.
Right. Yeah, I think the way we thought about this way back when is that if we can get people to use bicycles and get around town on a multi-use path, yes, you might be building a little bit more permeable surface, but the end result would be more people using bicycles to get around town. So it was worth the trade-off. So I think that's
So
the way
we're going to leave
thinking
the
about it.
condition as it is what I'm hearing, right?
I think we could leave it as it is. The only question is whether we want to just add the, where it could say to be approved by the city engineer and coordinated with Parks and Rec. I mean, that could be as coordinated by Parks and Rec, could be something that we could add there.
I think that would be good just to add kind of a review, and they can determine relative consistency of the trail, what makes sense.
I guess I don't know what process Parks and Rec goes through, if they've agreed to adopt this, if they have funds to pay for this, what process, if you're a developer and you say, okay, Parks and Rec, I want to build my subdivision, what do I have to make this trail? How they even know what to tell you. I mean, I don't think it seems hard to condition. This is maybe a question for Dustin. I don't even know how the coordination or approval of something with Parks and Rec works. They got a board. They got a master plan that's adopted, and do we have a trail standard for this segment?
It wouldn't be a formalized requirement. It would be more of a courtesy review.
Okay.
So there's really from us as we went. So the next stage with this would be the development of final engineering plans. It would really probably fall on the developer to get some, or to coordinate some suggested language and put them between engineering that is going to mandate some engineering standards and constructability, and parks, which would have really kind of a courtesy role in this until because they don't own it, they won't maintain it, they're not permitting it. So it's really more of a touch point. They comment on this application. That's really the formal aspect, and their comments get incorporated into this. But at the times of civil construction, it's really at that point it's really more of a courtesy response, not an official check off.
Yeah. So I guess to that question, then, is there any value in adding that? Because what are they going to tell us, and what are they going to do? Unfortunately,
I agree with you, Bill. I don't think there's any value to adding it.
Well, we already have approval by the city engineer. I guess the city engineer may have a responsibility to coordinate how this transportation system plan builds out, and maybe they can keep an eye on it.
Okay. So I do think that we could add some language to that condition number 12, which just suggests that we intend whatever permeable surface we end up with to function as a multi-purpose surface or multi-use surface.
Sorry, number 10, condition number 10?
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, 10. Yeah, okay.
And then, I just adding a condition under 5 that any construction, or 55, it would be adding any construction in a wetland requires, compliance with any necessary DSL permitting. Seems reasonable.
Yeah, I agree with that. Okay, any other modifications anyone wants to suggest? Okay, Bill, do you want to put that into a motion?
Sure. I'll make a motion. Let me get to whatever the file number is.
2021-43.
Okay, I'll make a motion that we approve file number 2022 or 2020.
2021.
2021-43 for Henderson Creek Planned Unit Development Subdivision, with the conditions in the staff report, with 2 modifications, which is modification of condition number 10, that the permeable surface, if any, in a delineated wetland functions as a multi-use surface. And then adding condition number 55, that any construction activities in a delineated wetland is going to require any, it has to comply with any necessary permitting or requirements of DSL.
Excellent. All right, do I have a second?
I'll second it.
All right, thanks, Commissioner Hoffman. All right, so we have a motion on the floor for approval of the conditional use permit for this planned unit development for 9-lot subdivision off Blackberry Drive. Applicant Elizabeth Betts of Klein and Associates. 2 modifications to the staff report's conditions of approval for number 10, as Commissioner Irving just described, about the permeable surface being ready for multi-use path, and then adding 55 commission approval for the coordination of the wetlands. Okay, any further discussion?
Mr. Chair, just one quick clarification. Sorry, I overlooked this. If you see the condition of approval number 44 already, I think this takes care of Commissioner Irving's request. Existing proposed condition 44, the property owner is responsible for contacting DSL and obtaining any applicable state or federal permits prior to commencing any site work within delineated wetlands. It's just for there to get that touch point.
Yeah, that I was looking for it and I was scanning the conditions and I didn't see it, but that's the thing that I was looking for. I think I'm satisfied if that's in there, that we do not need 44 is, that's exactly what I was going to say. 55 should say. So I don't know. I think we have a motion and we have a second. Process wise, we probably need to amend it or something.
Amend. Do we want to have an amended motion? Or do we want to vote on the first and then go to amendment, or can we throw that one out and start over?
I
Our
think
process.
procedurally you could amend as long as whoever is willing to second can amend it as well.
I
Okay.
agree.
Go ahead with your amendment,
So-
Bill.
Well, why don't I amend my motion and we'll remove that additional condition number 55.
Okay, thank you. Do we have a second?
I second that amendment.
All right, excellent. All right, so let's go with the voting process, please. If I could just jump down the list and get an aye or an A from everyone. Starting at the top of the list, I see Commissioner Irving,
Aye.
Commissioner Mitchell,
Aye.
Commissioner Hoffman,
Aye.
Commissioner Petzing.
Aye.
Did I get everyone? Commissioner Powers?
Aye.
Chair votes aye, motion passes. Appreciate your time. Thanks very much. If Mr. Betts is on, I want to thank him and Elizabeth for bringing the project to us tonight. Excellent project. Looking forward to it. And thanks for your time, everyone. And we'll
feel
see you in
better.
August, right?
August 15th, keep that on your calendar, please.
August 15th. Thanks all. Have a wonderful evening.
Thanks.
Oh,
Good night.
Okay, bye.